Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Levi Neal. I am a student at Lyon College, as well as a member of the Animal Behavior and Cognition Lab here at Lyon. This research experiment was also done in collaboration with Companion Animals New Zealand, which is a New Zealand company who's focused on bettering the relationship between cat guardians or animal guardians in general and their animals that they have. Now, this presentation is about interpreting these cat social interactions through their facial signals and whether or not New Zealanders can accurately interpret and predict these interactions. Now, there have been an increasing amount of cats kept indoors over recent years, which allows for us to study what happens in these social interactions more frequently. Now, whenever we're studying these interactions, it's primarily between cats in multi-cat households, but also shelters, which is where we recorded these videos. Now, indoor cats can produce a variety of facial signals, whether or not that's affiliative, being friendly, and non-affiliative, which is non-friendly. Now, those are two different contexts, and we'll talk a little bit more about them later. Now, whenever we're taking care of our cats or our animals, really don't want them to be stressed out or have a bad day, kind of like our friends and family. So whenever we see them having these bad times or they're stressed out, it can also cause stress for us. And so we want to be able to mitigate how much stress they endure during their lives with us. And so, whenever it comes to differentiating between these facial signals that they produce on a daily basis, it can be quite difficult because even the most minute facial signals can mean something completely different than what we were thinking. And this can allow us to mitigate the stress during agonistic encounters, which is non-affiliative encounters. Now, for our experiment and our study, our primary goal was to evaluate whether these cat guardians could accurately predict the outcomes and social interactions among domesticated cats. And this was in both affiliative and non-affiliative contexts. And so whenever we recorded these videos, we made sure to include both affiliative and non-affiliative videos. And we wanted to do this primarily using facial signaling information that we could look at in these videos. And so whenever we anticipated what would happen in our experiment, we looked at what predictions we could come up with. And what we were thinking about was that guardians who own one or more cats grew up in households with cats, frequently interacted with their cats growing up, but also had professional animal experience would be more accurate in their predictions. And the reason being is that whenever you have more interactions with a certain type of animal, you may be able to understand what they're thinking, the faces that they produce, and the body language that they also do that can lead to certain different outcomes. And so if a cat's ears are backwards and their mouth is open and you can see their teeth, you may think that that is a agonistic encounter if you've had these interactions with cats. But if you didn't, you may not know this and you may not be able to understand what's going on. So that's where our study came into play. So what we did was we recruited many participants through the Companion Animal New Zealand newsletter, which was sent out over a few weeks. And participants who decided to participate in this study viewed 10 video sets of social interactions, and five of those videos were affiliative, while five of them were non-affiliative. And each one of these videos were split into two different parts, one being a partial clip and the other being the full clip of the video. And the partial clip was only the beginning of the social interaction and the production of the very first facial signal. And so you weren't allowed to see the entire outcome of the video or any other facial signals that were produced. You were trying to predict what was going to happen in the rest of this interaction. Now, in the full clip, you were given the entire social interaction. So that consisted of the partial clip, which is the very start of the interaction, the first facial signal, but also the rest of the behaviors, the rest of the signals, and the overall outcome. Now, before the participants were even asked to look at these videos, they were asked a series of demographic questions to address our predictions in our last slide, which is these right here, P1 through P4. Now, moving on to the videos that they were asked to watch, they were two different clips. Remember, we had a partial clip and a full clip. Now, the participants were watching these partial clips, and once they got done watching that clip, they were then asked what they think happened, whether or not it was a affiliative context or non-affiliative context, so friendly or non-friendly, as well as why they think this is the answer. And so they could explain to us why they think it's this way, but if they got the wrong answer, we still marked it as wrong, despite their answer. Now, once they got done with the partial clip, as well as answering why they think this way, they then moved on to the full clip condition. Now, remember, this was the very start of the interaction as well as the entire outcome. And so the participants would get done watching the full clip and then were asked again whether or not they think it is affiliative or non-affiliative, but also had to explain why they think it's this way again. And so they had the opportunity to change their answer if they would like. Now, knowing what happened in the interaction was a very important factor because a lot of people actually changed their answers. But we'll get on into that here in just a minute. Now, whenever it came to the questions that we were asking, this is kind of a breakdown of our predictions. And so we were asking them if they currently shared their household with one or more cats, whether or not they grew up with cats, and whenever they were growing up with these cats, if they had frequent interactions. But also one of our primary indicators, which we'll find out here in a minute, of whether or not they could interpret and predict these interactions was their occupational experience or professional experience with these cats. And so our first prediction was that guardians who currently have one or more cats would exhibit similar performance to those who do not have cats. And so if they had cats or not, be would not be a determinant on whether or not they could predict these interactions. So our second prediction was guardians who grew up in homes with cats will also perform similarly to those who did not grow up with cats. So kind of the similar with our first prediction, but just a kind of a different context. But for prediction three, guardians who frequently interacted with cats during their childhood would also show similar performance to those who did not have frequent interactions with cats. Additionally, prediction four was quite different from the first three. And so the first three, they would all perform similarly despite their interactions or if they had cats. Prediction four was where there was a split. Individuals who had professional experience in working with animals would perform significantly better at predicting interactions between cats compared to those without professional experience. And this is going to be the bulk of our results that we see here in just a minute. Now, when we recruited these participants, we got about 600 people to participate in this study. We didn't really have a higher amount. The entire study took maybe about 2 hours, I believe, two hours for all these videos and the questionnaire. And there wasn't really a strong incentive. And so we could have had more people if we had a stronger incentive, but we did just fine with what we had. And so I think it worked out perfectly. Now, out of all of these participants, only about 87% were cat guardians, but all of these participants performed similarly in both the partial and full conditions of the affiliative facial signals and interactions. So they performed similarly, no matter if they had cats or not. Now, participants did poorly in the partial clip condition for non-affiliative facial signals and interactions. Non-affiliative interactions have a lot more minute facial signals that cats can produce, and so they might have not picked up on these like minute facial signals because they might not have professional experience. But after they saw the full clip condition, they changed their responses to the correct answer. And so here we see that being able to see the full interaction of these cats could help us understand what is going on entirely. And so, um, if we were trying to predict what was going to happen, we might not be as good as we think. Now, whenever we looked at the data who had, whenever we looked at the data with the people who had animal related experience or professional experience, they performed way better in predicting the outcomes of non-affiliative facial signals. And that's quite interesting, because I, before starting this project, thought that if you have more interactions with cats and you grew up with them but didn't have professional experience, you might still be able to understand what's going on in this cat's mind. But that's not actually the case. You might understand your cat's interactions and their facial expressions, but that's not dynamic across the entire population or other communities of cats. So that was a very interesting find, and I think was one of the major finds of our entire project, which was baffling. However, there weren't any significant differences in the testing scores for affiliative and non-affiliative conditions based on cat ownership, interaction frequency with cats growing up, and prior cat guardianship. And so, even if you had all these experiences in these different fields, there wasn't really any difference here, and it was not a telltale sign of whether or not you could predict what was going to happen in the future interactions of cats. Of, well, not of the cats, but specifically the interaction of that specific set of cats. Now, overall, our study wanted to address the gaps in the existing literature by studying the human perceptions of cat to cat socio-communicative behavior, because primary literature right now has been focusing on cat to cat interactions, or sorry, cat to human interactions, but not cat to cat interactions. And so humans looking at a cat to cat interaction is not really studied, and how we predict what's going on. And so that's where our study came into play. Now, we tested four different research predictions associated with the current and prior cat-related experiences of these individuals, which was if they owned one or more cats, if they grew up in a household with cats, if they had frequent interactions with cats when they were growing up, as well as if they had professional animal experience. And what we found was that people tend to struggle more with perceiving and predicting non-affiliative interactions between cats. Now, like I said earlier, this is because they have minute facial signals that can mean something completely different than what we thought. Or you just don't really understand the facial signals of non-affiliative interactions, like whenever cats bring their ears backwards and they part their mouth, they could be getting ready to fight or they're upset. But if their ears are forward and they're kind of close to you, that means they're really trusting and they are open to kind of interacting with you. Now, whenever we ran through our results, we discovered that individuals with professional experience working with these animals are significantly better at recognizing what is going on in non-affiliative conditions and also predicting the conflicts between cats. Because whenever they only saw the partial clip condition, they got the answer correct, but also kept their answer in the full clip condition. They didn't see the full outcome in the partial clip, and they were able to predict that that interaction was going to be agonistic, which people who didn't have professional experience could not do. Now, if we were to continue this project, we would love to be able to make a cat facial expression dictionary. And so these training tools, which would be created by professionals, would be crucial for reducing pet owner stress and educating them on effective conflict management strategies. Because if you would be able to understand the non-affiliative facial signals of cats, you would be able to be significantly better at reducing the amount of agonistic encounters that not only your cat would experience, but also you as a guardian. And this would reduce our stress significantly. And I know for me, that would help me with my cat. We would also, wrapping things up, love to express our gratitude to Companion Animals New Zealand for allowing me to do this project. They generously supported our project with funding and was an amazing experience to work with. We would also like to extend our thanks to the staff and volunteers at the Cat Cafe Lounge in Los Angeles, California. They allowed us to record videos of their cats, and they were an amazing group of people to work with. And I've always heard good things about them whenever I was talking to the lady who actually went there and recorded the video footage. Here are our references, and I would also like to thank everybody watching. Thank you so much, and I hope everybody has a great day. Goodbye.